Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and for doing that technology check for me. I am so appreciative of you all being here, and I am going to jump right into things because we're going to cover a lot of ground about how to write effective email appeals in a very short period of time. So, if you're not familiar with me, hello, my name is Abby Jarvis. I'm part of the team over at Neon One. If you're not familiar with us, if this is kind of the first time you've interacted with us, we're a software platform that provides fundraising tools and donor management services and lots of other tools to nonprofits. Um, so we have a number of different products, but I wanted to reassure you two things. So I see some familiar names here. If you are a Neon One user, everything you learn here today is going to be applicable in Neon CRM. But if you're not a Neon One user, that's phenomenal. We're so happy you're here. You're going to be able to use everything we talk about today at your own organization, regardless of the tools you're using. So, just a couple little housekeeping things because these questions always come up. Please do ask me questions. I want this to be as good for you and as useful for you as possible. So use that Q&A box to ask questions. And I'm encouraging you to use that Q&A box because I also love it when people talk to me in the chat, and I'm going to ask you to do that today. But when that happens, the chat can move really quickly and it can be hard for me to catch all of the questions. So if you have questions, put them in the Q&A box. It will be much more likely that I'm able to see them and respond to them. And if you need me to stay a little late to hit a lot of those questions, that's okay. We can do that. The other question I get every time is, are you recording this webinar and can I have the slides? And the answer is yes. I am recording this webinar and I will give you the slides and even a transcript and some other goodies in a follow-up email. And that will land in your inbox tomorrow morning. So if you need to revisit this or if you want to share it with someone, it's no problem. You can forward it to whomever and you'll get that tomorrow morning. So my picture is not showing up, but hello. There I am. Okay. So if you are wondering who I am and why I'm talking to you about email appeals, my name is Abby, but I've covered that already. I've been in the nonprofit tech industry for a little over 11 years now, and I've gotten really passionate about understanding what donors love when they interact with their favorite nonprofits, why they behave the way they do, and how you can use data about your donors to reach them more effectively and inspire them to be involved with your cause. So that's who I am. The research that I'm going to pull on today, I hope you will be able to take back to your desks. I assume you're already at a desk, but apply this to your own email appeals. So, before we really dig into it, I want to ask you all, how comfortable are you with writing and sending email appeals? Is this something that you're an old pro at and you're just like looking for some maybe updated best practices? Is this not your favorite thing, which is understandable? Writing appeals is really intimidating. Let me know in the chat how you feel about writing email appeals because I'll kind of tailor what I talk about today a little bit based on what your experiences are and what you're interested in. So Erica's in between the two options. Erica, I feel like a lot of people are in your shoes. Could do this all day. Updated best practice. Not my favorite thing. We have a pretty good range. Ooh, someone's in grant writing. If you can write a grant, I promise you can write an email appeal. Okay, perfect. This is really helpful. And I am going to pro at sending, but learning the writing parts. That's a really good call out. So the reason I ask is because we are going to have a little bit of new best practices and some interesting data that you can use. But some of you sound like you're very familiar with this topic. And if you see any, or if you have any like pearls of wisdom that you would like to drop in the chat, I highly recommend you do so. Okay, whoops. Um, for those of you who are interested, I did put together this checklist that you can use during your next appeal. I'll also make sure this is on the page that I send you to, and when I send you the recording. And I did want to call out this comment from Lily Stark because I feel like it's really important. I often feel like this is a waste, or it's a waste of time. To be honest, we don't get a ton of donations based on emails, mostly direct communications and written appeals. And I think that is fascinating, and I think that is fine. If that is the way your donors love to support you, I encourage you to continue on that. But this is a perfect segue into the next. Before I segue into the next thing, I'm going to drop y'all a link. If the QR code isn't working for you, I just dropped a link in the chat to where you can download this thing. Anyway, I love that Lily added that because we found some really interesting data around donor preferences. But Lily's comment about the fact that their donors mostly give through other channels is fantastic, because this just proves that the statistic that we found is not necessarily applicable to every nonprofit every time. So we looked at a couple of different things. I believe the statistic that 48% of donors cite email as a preferred communication method. That comes from a resource from Nonprofit Tech for Good, which, if you're not familiar with Heather over at Nonprofit Tech for Good, I highly recommend you check her out. She is phenomenal. But when she pulled this together, she found that almost half of donors prefer email, both for receiving updates and for receiving appeals. And that beat out direct mail and social media, and then other things like texting and phone calls. But as Lily's comment kind of brings up, not every donor base has the same preferences as everyone else. So as we run through this, take what you can from this. You know your donor base better than anybody else does. So take what you can from this presentation, and maybe some of it will be applicable to direct mail appeals. Maybe some of it will get you more excited about writing email appeals. So now I'm going to kind of throw a lot of information at you in a short period of time, but I hope it's going to be absorbable. I want to call out for a lot of you. I have encountered a lot of fundraisers who have a lot of trepidation almost around sending emails, especially email appeals, because they feel like they may be pestering the people on their lists, or maybe they're being intrusive. And I want to remind you that, again, that half of donors have told us that their preferred communications channel for interacting with you is email. And when you are sending someone an invitation to give, when you're sending them an email appeal, you're communicating with them through their preferred channel, and you're inviting them to support a cause that they've already proven in some way that they care about. So that's an important thing. You're not annoying them, you're inviting them to do something that they've already indicated that they love. So that invitation is phenomenal, but it's even better when it is presented to them in a nicely designed email appeal. And your email appeals design can make a big impression on people right when they open it. So here are some design tips to keep in mind as you prepare your next appeal. You're going to see a number of screenshots throughout this, so I want to call out where these screenshots are coming from. To illustrate some of these best practices, I'm going to use this appeal, which was sent to my colleague, Tim, from IPH. They are a nonprofit that is local to him. They serve New York State, and they did a fantastic job with this appeal, and I'm going to use it as an example for a lot of what we're going to talk about. I feel like it's better than a silly one that I came up with. So when people open your email, they should recognize you. And that means using signals, design elements that they will associate with your organization. Typically, that includes at least your organization's brand colors and your logo. And I say typically because there are some exceptions, and this email is actually one of those exceptions. This is a Valentine's Day appeal. So IPH used a color scheme that's slightly different than their organization's overall brand colors. But I did want to point out, and I did here, that in two places, so both here in their header and then down here in their footer, they still have their logo in their brand colors. And that lets people know subtly who this email is coming from, even before they actually read the body of the email. You may also want to use some other branding elements too. You may be able to explore using some custom fonts, and I'm going to get into fonts more in a minute. And you will also want to try to choose images that line up with your organization's visual identity. So a simple example, if you tend to use a lot of black and white photos on your site or in your appeals, maybe you want to use black and white photos here. Or if you like using lots of bright colors, you may want to continue to use bright colors in your email appeal, because people have they use that as a marker to understand who you are. And that those branding elements are hard to quantify, but they do make a subconscious impression on people. Now I'm going to clarify, these two images did not come from IPH. They also did not necessarily come from Neon One users. These are images I pulled from appeals I myself have gotten from other organizations. But I pulled these because when we're talking about imagery, a really important best practice is to look for images that are people-centered. And you'll notice this asterisk here by people, because this is another rule that has exceptions. Animals and other characters, especially if they're anthropomorphized, so like given human characteristics, can also work in these images. Your goal in any imagery you use in an appeal is to show your readers something that they can establish a personal connection with. People are more likely to be able to connect emotionally with a person or a pet or something else with human characteristics than they would be able to connect with a simple graphic design, or even something that's in real life but is an inanimate object like a building. So I included these two images here. I love this cat in particular at the bottom, because he's making eye contact with the reader. And so the reader will be able to make a connection with that cat. And then it's kind of reinforced by the text in the image. He was rescued just in time. So I hope these examples are helpful. But again, there are opportunities to experiment. This header from IPH does not work to connect with the reader with a person. Instead, they use the header to reiterate their appeal. This image isn't people-centered, but it is specific to their campaign. It matches the design of the rest of their email and is very impact-centered. And that last point is really important. Your imagery is a powerful way, again, to help people understand who they will impact with their gift, and the text on this image does the same thing. Um, I hope that kind of makes sense. So if you're choosing imagery, start with a human or a character-centered image that connects donors to who they will impact when they give. If you choose not to do that, if you need to go a different route, make sure you're still using that header to reiterate the outcome that someone will make possible with their donation. Now, I alluded to fonts a little earlier, but I want to spend some time talking to you about them because they are very important. Um, how many of you, just let me know in the chat, how many of you use custom fonts at your organization? At Neon One, for example, we have several. We use one called Montserrat. We use one called Fiera Sans, and a number of different iterations of that. We have one called Roboto that we use. Let's see. Some use Montserrat. Awesome. We use a mix. Okay. So the reason I mention this is because regardless of how you use your fonts, you want to make sure that the ones you use primarily for the body copy are simple and easy to read. So if you ever have a custom font with like lots of serifs or script fonts, those might not be the best choice for an email. You also want the font you use to be large enough to read. If you've ever found yourself squinting at a phone, you know how frustrating that can be. And you also want them to be high contrast, so they show up easily against a background. So keep this in mind, and you want this to apply to all text, including text on images like IPH had on the last screenshot, in the body of your appeal, and on your buttons. So I've included some examples here. This top text, very easy to read, high contrast, simple font, you can read it. This script font is a lot harder to read, but it could work if it was much larger, maybe on an image like IPH did. This gray text on a blue background is a simple font and it's large enough, but the contrast is low. And it's the same with this font at the bottom that's laid over this graphic. So make sure you're checking the fonts that you use, probably on a multitude of different devices, mostly because it can render differently in different areas. The folks at IPH, again, did a great job here. Their email appeal uses fonts that are very simple. They stand out well. They used a white background, and they used a red background for the buttons. You'll notice that they changed the font color on the red background. If you remember also, they did use a different, more complicated font. They used a cursive font on the header, but it was large enough that it was easy to read. And I did see someone allude to this, and I'm going to add a note here. Something I have learned from painful experience is that if you try to use a lot of custom fonts in your emails, be prepared for those fonts not to work in different email clients. Outlook in particular hates showing custom fonts. So if you can, either choose a font that is used system wide, Arial is a safe one. Or a lot of email systems give you the opportunity to choose a backup font. So if your custom font doesn't render for whatever reason, there's a fallback. And I would also encourage you to test your emails, especially if you're using custom elements like fonts, so you can see how they work in different email clients and even on different devices. Okay. So your design makes a big first impression on your readers. It's the first thing they'll notice when they open your message. But your copy, though, is really what's going to inspire them to donate. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to create some good copy. My first couple of tips, though, are content related, but they don't relate to the body of the appeal itself. And my first tip is to use a sender name that is a real person, not a generic name like Aglo Nature Center, or much worse, something like no reply at organizationname.com. You may have noticed this when you got the invitation to this webinar, if you registered that way. Whose email are you going to be more likely to open? Are you going to open an email from Abby at Neon One, or are you going to open an email from Neon One Webinars, or just Neon One, or even no reply at Neon One? The reason this works is silly, but it's simple. Again, people love interacting with other people. Donors love knowing that their support goes to help real people, and those donors are going to be more likely to read and interact with emails when they come from real people. Your donors probably know reasonably that you're not actually sending them an individual message. They know that this is coming to them through Neon CRM or MailChimp or Constant Contact or something, but they do like seeing that name there. You can try experimenting with this, see what your engagement metrics look like when you use a person's name instead of a generic send account. I bet you will see better engagement with that personal name. We've noticed using a name in the sender email picks up as spam, so we use contact at. Interesting, and that's why I love experimenting. We noticed the opposite. And this is why, Gabrielle, this is a perfect example of why you should be testing this kind of thing and tracking your performance, because that is a real danger that can happen. Quite a few of our donors respond to our emails and texts as if they're really from members of our team, which is wild to me. But that's so cool, because that means that you're doing a really good job not only of building those connections with people, but also writing content like you're a human being talking to other human beings, and not a nameless, faceless nonprofit organization addressing a multitude of donors. That's fascinating. Okay. I could talk about that for a long time. All right. My second tip is to spend a lot of time on your subject line. I write a lot of emails. I am awful at subject lines. I will frequently spend as much time writing a subject line as I will writing the email itself. I'm also going to encourage you to use preview text. So let's get a little bit into these two elements. When you are writing your subject lines, I would encourage you strongly to try to write a subject line that elicits a positive emotional reaction. We did some research into email performance last year, and we used AI to analyze a bunch of different subject lines, thousands of subject lines, and analyze the emotion of the subject line and how that emotion lined up with the overall email performance. Um, what we found is that positive emotional sentiments in those subject lines elicited higher interaction rates just kind of across the board. So these were some of the highest performing positive sentiments. What I want you to take from this is that, one, it's not a bad thing to try to elicit an emotional response from your readers. That's okay. I know there's a lot of fear. Some people can be very uncomfortable intentionally trying to elicit emotional reactions from people, but it works. And the reason I think it works, I can't back this up with data. This is purely anecdotal. We get a lot of emails. I think the average person gets something like 120 emails a day. A lot of them are negative. There's a lot of bad news out there, or it's really aggressive sales pitches or shopping notifications. When we see those positive, uplifting emotions in our inboxes, they're a bright spot for us, and they're probably going to be a bright spot for your donors too. So try doing that. Try intentionally writing subject lines that evoke positive feelings. The other thing I would encourage you to do is make sure you're customizing the preview text of your email. Your preview text, if you're not familiar with what that is, that's the little snippet of content that you'll see next to a sender and the subject name or subject line in most email clients. I can't think of one that doesn't show you your preview text. If you don't add preview text, you don't have a ton of control over what happens. Sometimes you'll see something like organization logo dot ping there instead of some good content. But your preview text helps your readers understand what they're going to find when they open your appeal or whatever email you're sending. So try helping them understand what they're going to find when they open your appeal by using preview text. They had, when in our evaluation, those had higher open rates. They also had higher fundraising totals. I suspect some of that is because organizations were using preview text more for appeals than they were for other kinds of emails, but it's something to experiment with. See if that gets you more engagement there. Okay. Now, after you've caught your reader's attention with that personalized send name and a positive feeling subject line, you've shown them some preview text, they understand what they're going to see when they open your appeal. You want to use the content of your email to establish a connection between the reader and the impact they're going to have when they give. Um, Nancy, it's a great question. CTR is your click through rate. So one of the most immediate ways you can establish a connection with your readers is to use their name in the salutation. Humans are hardwired to respond to our names. Using someone's name here instead of using something generic will make it easier for you to catch someone's attention and inspire them to keep reading. Now, that said, we've all probably seen it happen where the personalization tag doesn't pull in properly, or something happens and you don't have a piece of data for that donor. Maybe you don't have their first name. Um, I suggest having a fallback salutation. Um, I like using Hey There as a fallback. I've also seen some really cool ones from nonprofits that allude to someone's connection to their cause. So one I've gotten recently was Dear Animal Hero. They didn't have my name. I had just signed up for their newsletter. And they use Dear Animal Hero instead. And that's much more endearing and attention grabbing than something like Dear Friend, or the worst one I've ever gotten, which was Dear Valued Donor. Nothing makes me feel less like a valued donor than calling me Dear Valued Donor. Um, so as you're writing your copy, you will often want to tell a story that leads up to your appeal. And just as you want to use imagery that connects your readers to people, you'll want to tell a story that connects your readers to people. Instead of focusing on statistics or broad statements, focus on fostering that personal connection between your donor and the people they're going to help with their gift. So a common one, say you're a food pantry and you're asking someone to donate to help provide lunches to students during the summer vacation. Telling them that their gift will help feed students like Jeffrey is going to be more effective than saying our organization feeds 15,000 students every year. Please join us. Jeffrey is more compelling. So focus on those individual stories as if you can. Um, Whether you choose to tell that story, it's not always necessary. This example from IPH is proof that you don't always have to tell a story. Make sure you do tell your donor why they should give and what they're going to accomplish when they do give. This sounds silly. I know that we're talking about email appeals, but you would be amazed at how many emails I've gotten that ask me to give, but don't tell me why. They don't tell me what the money is going to be used for. and they don't tell me like anything other than just telling me that I should give. Um, oh, I, y'all check out the chat. There's some really good ideas. One thing that I do love here is that Giselle asked, if we use a salutation, do we need to include a signature line in the email closer? I would actually encourage you to use a signature line anyway. And I would encourage you, again, to have that signature line be from somebody. Um, Even better if you can add like a little image of the person that's getting it. Again, that just reinforces that personal connection between the donor, the person asking for support, and the people that support will go toward. So definitely try doing that. Thoughts on making up a story if and when we can't really capture stories easily. This is one of my favorite topics, and I've got 5 minutes left to go over this next bit, so I'm not going to get super into it. But what I will tell you, if you have a hard time capturing stories, or if you are in an area where you can't safely share stories about the people you serve, there are a lot of missions in which that's the case. You can absolutely make up stories or make up composite characters. That said, I would be very intentional about telling your reader that this represents maybe clients of yours, or you've changed details to protect people's identities. There are ways you can do that. You just need to make sure you are not lying, if that makes sense. Um, you can certainly get creative with the stories you tell, but you want to make sure you don't lie, or even lead people to believe that that's a true story. So, okay, this bit is important. Everything you write in your copy is going to be supporting your call to action. Your call to action, if you're not familiar with that very marketing specific phrase, is the thing you ask people to do after they read your email. When you get the email from me tomorrow with this, one of the calls to action is going to be click here to get the recording and slides. So you want to nail your call to action. This is important. And on that front, I have 2 tips for you. The first, it's going to sound silly, is to include a very clear, very specific call to action. Ask people to give, ask them to donate. Use those words. If you are worried about that, I can tell you that when we did that AI analysis of words in subject lines that inspired or words in subject lines for emails, some of the most effective ones included the word donate and included the word support. You may even ask people to donate a specific amount. That is what IPH did here. In this case, it was a donate $5 or more. That was their ask, donate $5 or more. But make it very specific, very clear when you are asking someone to do something. People scan emails all the time. If you hint that you want them to donate, a lot of people are not going to pick up on that. And then when you ask people to donate, I implore you to link to a donation form, and not only link to a donation form, but link to that donation form multiple times. In our research last year, we found that the sweet spot was about 6 links to a single donation form in a single appeal. This has they have a link in the header image, they have a link in the first paragraph, a link in the second paragraph, a link in the last paragraph, and then a link at a button at the bottom. So this might seem silly, but think about it this way. Imagine you're reading an appeal on your phone and you read this third paragraph, and something about the story just hits you right in the heart and you immediately want to give. But then you have to scroll up and down through the email looking for the button that you get to get you over to the donation form. That's not a very good experience. So your goal isn't necessarily to just like inundate everyone with all of these links. You don't have to use 6 if you're writing a short appeal. IPH didn't, but you do want to make it really easy for someone to get to your donation form from wherever they are in the email. I would also encourage you to include a mix of link types like IPH did here. Use linked images, use buttons, and use those in addition to those text hyperlinks. Clicking on this button at the bottom of the IPH email would be much easier for a mobile user, probably, than clicking on some of the text hyperlinks. Couple little things. We really want to make sure we give our donors good experiences. So here are some steps you can take to do that. Let's see if my computer loads this. We love what's happening. Okay, so make sure your appeal loads quickly and displays properly. And you're going to want to do this on multiple devices. If you notice maybe that your images are not loading quickly, you can try compressing them. You can just search image compressors. They'll give you smaller file sizes that load more rapidly. You can also try removing custom fonts. We've talked about that already, but those custom fonts sometimes can really slow things down. And then if you have lots of different design elements or even like old code in your template, you can try removing those to see if you can get those load times better. Make sure as you're testing this that you look at these on mobile devices too. More people access email on mobile devices than anything else. So check on your phone. Bonus points if you look at both an Android and iPhone phone, because sometimes things will just work differently based on the device. Okay. We also want to make sure that any images you use include alt text. So you should be able to see where you can include that in your email service provider. When you use alt text is text that doesn't necessarily display in an email, but it describes what's happening in your images or what your images include. Including that is an important way to make your email accessible to people who are using screen readers. And then you're also going to want to make sure you have an unsubscribe link and that it is easy for people to unsubscribe from you. You don't need to worry about your unsubscribe rate. If people are unsubscribing from you, really that means that they're not going to be invested in your mission, and that's okay. They're not your people. Most people will look for your unsubscribe button at the bottom of your email. New requirements now say that you must have an unsubscribe button at the top of your email. That is a requirement that will be in effect in June. That's from Gmail and I believe Yahoo. And we've had this question before, so I'll just head it off now. If you're a Neon One client, that is already updated in the system, so that you don't have to worry about that unsubscribe link there. Okay. I have seen some good questions rolling through. We went a little more slowly today than I would have loved due to some technical issues on my end. Thank you for being patient with me. I'm going to scroll through some of these questions. Oh, I love this one. Have you found increased opens when using little emoticons like arrows, music icons, high five icons, etc.? So, Mark, we don't the short answer is we don't know. So we did analyze emoji usage in subject lines in the report. I believe I included a link to that, both in the handout that you all got today and in the email you'll get tomorrow. Some fewer than 4% of people included emojis in their subject lines. So that's not a large enough sample size for me to give you any kind of definitive answer on that. What I will say is that you totally can experiment with using emojis in subject lines. However, if you do choose to do that, look for emojis that are kind of related to your mission and avoid emojis that show up a lot in spam. So if I look in my spam account, I see a lot of like the rotating like red siren lights. I see a lot of flame emojis. I see a lot of the two emotion or the two exclamation points. I think in Unicode they're called bang bang. So experiment with it for sure. Avoid spammy ones. Look for emojis that are more closely like aligned with your mission. So if you're a nature conservation organization, maybe use a tree or a flower. Or if you're an animal shelter, use one of the animal emojis. I would try there. Okay. Ask them to give how many times, how many asks would be going overboard? That's a good question, Tim. So a general rule that I would encourage you to do, and this is something I'm pulling from my marketing background, not necessarily fundraising background. As a general rule, someone should know within the first couple of sentences that you want them to give, and then you can reinforce that give throughout. I would encourage you again to make it clear. And I want you to remember that most people who read your emails are not sitting down and doing a close reading. They're scanning your email. So I would ask several times throughout the body of the email. A good rule of thumb is to have one early, one in the middle of your appeal, one toward the end. And then, believe it or not, a lot of people look at postscripts. So add a PS message underneath your signature block and reiterate your appeal there. But just space those appeals out throughout the email. If it's a really short appeal, you may ask 2 or 3 times. If it's really long, you may ask 6 or more. So there's not a perfect number. It's more the perfect density. Like it needs to be sprinkled throughout. What is a custom font? Okay. So a custom font is a font that I can hear my designer watching this and be like, that's not what that is. A custom font is a font that you download and use on your own computer. This is opposed to a system font, which are fonts that already come preloaded in everyone's machine. So some system fonts that you're probably familiar with, Arial is one. Calibri is like the default font for Windows, I believe. Um, Helvetica is usually available on everyone's computers. Some custom ones are things like we use Fear Sans. We had to go download that to use it. So that's not available on everyone's computer. So I hope that's clear. That's the difference between a system and a custom font. Um, Cindy, sometimes emojis show up as different ones. A heart showed as a horse. That's one, hilarious, and two, a great reminder that we should be testing our emails. Raven asked, how often do you recommend sending out donation appeals? And I'm going to give you the most annoying answer, which is it depends. Um, I would certainly send them fairly regularly. You don't want to send people one every week, probably. But one thing that you can do to make sure you're not over soliciting your donors is to build segments of donors. So maybe you ask people fairly frequently, say you send, and I'm making this up, say you send an appeal once a month. But you want to make sure that you filter out people that donated 2 days ago. You can ask more frequently if your asks are tailored to the person that's receiving them. And then this is an important thing. So how many of you, just let me pull the chat back up. How many of you have heard the phrase donor fatigue or get worried about fatiguing your donors? Because that happens a lot. Okay. Yep. Donor. Okay. So here's what I'm going to tell you about donor fatigue. Someone who's much smarter than me, his name is Mark Pittman, told me almost a decade ago that donor fatigue is not real. Donor fatigue is real when they are constantly asked for money, but don't know what it was being used for and what was accomplished the last time they gave. So if your donors know, hey, since the last time we asked for your support, we've worked with our donors to achieve X, Y, and Z. You gave $40. You helped reach this important milestone. We were able to feed Jeffrey and his friends, I don't know, 6,000 meals this summer. Can you help us do this new thing? I always joke about it. Think about having, I don't have kids, but pretend your niece or whatever asks you for money. She needs help with her college tuition, and you give her some money and you never hear back from her until she emails you a month later and she's like, hey, can I have some more money? You probably wouldn't really want to give her any more money. But if she had asked you for help paying for tuition, and then she emailed you a week later and thanked you, she got registered for her classes, she got her book, she's gone to the first week of school, you'd be much more likely to help her. So instead of worrying about how frequently you're asking, I would focus on making sure you're constantly communicating with your donors and helping them understand what is going on um, and how their gift has been used. Ooh, love this one. So good question from Lily. Do you have recommendations for choosing text to bold in the body of your email and any limits or best practices for how many different links to include? Read the story on our blog, follow us on social, etc. So when it comes to choosing the text you're going to bold, I would recommend, this is something I learned when I first got into marketing, whether you're bolding font or hyperlinking font. The phrase that you bold or hyperlink should be a complete phrase that can be read and understood on its own. So if you want to say, students like Jeffrey need your help, you can make a difference. That's terrible, but I'm making it up off the top of my head. You want to bold or highlight, you can make a difference for students like Jeffrey, or use that as your hyperlink. You wouldn't like, you could probably bold or highlight and make a difference. But when you're bolding or hyperlinking anything in your copy, what you're looking for is to highlight or bold phrases that people will catch as they skim over it, and you want them to get a feel for what you're wanting them to do or what you're telling them about. So go for complete phrases and choose phrases that help them understand what's going on. I am going to answer, I think, maybe one more because we are 10 minutes past and I want to be respectful of your time. Greg asked a fantastic question. How can we structure emails so that they are read easily on desktop and on a phone? So many emails can't be read on a phone easily because you have to scroll side to side. What Without knowing what system you're using, there should be the option for you to build emails that are immediately responsive. Um, believe that's pretty standard. If they aren't, I would go through your settings and check. And then if you can't find any in your settings, I would look for some support articles or talk to someone about getting that set up. Most email clients, so when I say email clients, I mean platforms or services used to create and send emails, should have that as a default option. If you're not seeing that in your own emails, I suspect there's a setting somewhere that maybe has been missed, or a setting that you can turn on. And if there's not, I would really encourage you to talk to your support team, because that should be available for you. It may just be a funny setting that's hidden somewhere strangely. Okay. 85 of you are hanging on still, and I am so proud of you for being here with me a full 11 minutes after time. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being patient with me as I navigate running this on a completely inappropriate machine. You guys have been stars. Do keep an eye out on your inbox. It will come from me, Abby at Neon One, probably. It won't come just from a generic email. It's a good best practice. Keep an eye out for that email. It will include a link to the page, and that page will have the slides, the recording, a transcript, and a link you can use to download that checklist for email appeals. You all are fantastic. Whether you are an old pro at writing these emails or whether you're about to do your first one, you're going to do an amazing job. Thank you for spending time with me. I will talk to you all tomorrow. Bye.